Welcome to Cheat Sheet Tales, where secrets slip, lies unravel, and the truth always has a twist. Real stories, raw confessions, shocking betrayals. Drop a comment if you've ever caught a red flag too late. Now, let's get into today's tale. My parents donated my $7K drum kit to their church band, and Dad said, "You were never good anyway." I said, "Thanks for the honesty." They didn't know I had a recording session scheduled with a Grammy-nominated artist, and when his manager called the house, I, 26 female, saved for years to buy a $7,000 drum kit, which my extremely religious parents donated to their church, without asking. When I confronted my dad, he said I was never good anyway. I just said, "Thanks for the honesty," and walked out. What they didn't know is that I had just landed a recording session with a Grammy-nominated artist. Then the artist's manager called our house asking about the drum kit. "Where's my kit?" I asked, standing in the middle of my parents' garage, staring at the empty corner where my drum set had lived for almost 2 years. My dad didn't even look up from his coffee. "Oh, we gave it to the church pastor. Caleb said the youth band needed..." "One, you gave away my kit without asking. You live in our house, Zara," he said with that familiar mix of superiority and apathy that I'd grown up with. "It was just taking up space. Besides," he chuckled, "you were never that good anyway." I just stood there blinking. The kind of pause where your heart stutters before your brain catches up, and then I said, "Thanks for the honesty." Turned around and left. My name is Zara, but most people just call me Zara. I'm 26 now, living in Nashville. When this happened, I was 22 and living with my parents in a town outside of Knoxville, Tennessee. I had just graduated from Belmont University with a degree in music business and was still figuring out my next steps. I was saving money by staying at home for a bit, trying to line up gigs, session work, anything that would inch me closer to doing music full-time. I was still paying off student loans, and while I had a few options for renting a room in Nashville, I needed a little more time to build a financial cushion. My parents weren't thrilled with my major, but they tolerated it as long as I kept God first and didn't embarrass them. Dad, Ethan, was a retired fire chief and now volunteered full-time with our church. My mom, Marina, was a homemaker who never understood why a girl would want to play drums instead of singing hymns in the choir. Drumming became my escape in high school, my identity in college, and eventually my plan for the future. I worked all through school at a local record shop and saved every spare dime. By my junior year, I bought myself a custom black pearl kit with maple shells and a Zildjian cymbal pack, $7,000 in total, plus soundproofing, mic equipment, and a few extras. It was the one thing in my life I could point to and say, "This is mine. I built this." I practiced every night in the garage. My dad's only request was that I not play during Jeopardy or when the church elders were over. Fair enough. I had even been working with a former touring drummer named Jared who lived nearby and offered lessons. He was rough around the edges, but he taught me how to control tempo, how to phrase with feeling, how to listen to a band, not just keep the beat. He told me I had tight hands and something to say. That meant more to me than anything my parents had ever said about my music. If they said anything at all, they always acted like it was a hobby I'd eventually outgrow, like I was going through a phase, even at 22. Around that time, a friend of mine from Belmont who'd gone on to do A&R work introduced my playing to a rising indie artist named Sienna Cross. She was just starting work on her new album and needed a percussionist who could blend classical and modern elements. Apparently, she watched one of my YouTube reels and asked her manager, Dante, to reach out. I almost fainted when I got the email. They invited me to a studio in Atlanta for a week of recording. Dante asked for my kit specs, availability, and if I'd be able to travel with my equipment. The session was in 3 weeks. I hadn't told my parents yet. I was planning to after dinner that weekend, maybe with the offer letter printed out so they'd realize how big this was. But then I got home and found the garage empty. I thought it was some kind of joke. Maybe they moved it for cleaning. Maybe the church borrowed it temporarily. Nope. Dad had given it away. Just decided it was better off in the hands of the church youth band. No text, no heads up, nothing. When I confronted him, he said he thought I didn't care about it anymore, said I never used it for anything real, and that the Lord's work was a better place for it than just another distraction. That's when he said, "You were never that good anyway." And I said, "Thanks for the honesty." I don't know why that's what came out. It wasn't sarcastic. It wasn't angry. Just numb. And then I left. I packed a bag and drove straight to Nashville to crash with my cousin Tessa, who lived in a one-bedroom apartment above a bookstore. The next day, Dante called my parents' landline to finalize the studio logistics. From what Tessa later told me, the voicemail was awkwardly professional and polite. "Hi, this is Dante Marston, manager for Sienna Cross. We're trying to confirm recording dates with Zara and wanted to check on travel arrangements and gear requirements." She mentioned she owns a Pearl custom drum kit. Can she bring it with her, or should we rent something locally? Apparently, my dad just stared at the phone, then played the message again. They started blowing up my phone. Calls, texts, voicemails. "We didn't know. Come back home, we can fix this." Not a single apology, just panic. I didn't answer. Instead, I called Dante back and explained everything. I was ready to lose the gig, but he surprised me. "Your parents do?" He didn't even pause. "Don't worry about the kit. We'll rent you something just like it." The session went ahead as planned. We recorded 4 tracks, and Sienna cried during one of them. She said, "I played like someone who knew grief." That stuck with me. The album came out 6 months later, Ashes of November. It got a nomination for Best Contemporary Album at the Grammys. My name was right there in the liner notes, Zara Reeves, drums. I didn't reply to their messages. Not immediately. I couldn't. Every time I even opened a text from my dad, my body tensed. It wasn't just about the drums. It wasn't just about $7,000. It was about years of being dismissed, minimized, and treated like my dreams were a juvenile inconvenience to them. And now that those dreams were finally taking shape, suddenly, they were concerned. Suddenly they cared. But only after someone important came calling. For the next few weeks, I stayed on Tessa's pull-out couch. She worked nights as a nurse and let me have the place during the day to practice, make calls, and plan. I was living out of a suitcase and using a rented kit Dante's team helped source from a local studio. But even so, I was more myself than I'd been in years. I recorded more tracks with Sienna during post-production, and through that, connection. I was introduced to a whole network of artists and producers who needed percussionists for live sets, studio work, even short tours. Suddenly, I was booking more gigs than I could say yes to. I found a room for rent in East Nashville above a barber shop. Tiny space, had to stack my cymbals in the closet, and eat ramen 5 days a week, but it was mine. No more treading around my dad's moods. No more negotiating respect with people who would never give it freely. About 2 months after the Atlanta session, I got a text from my mom. "Saw you in the album credits, proud of you, hope we can talk soon." No apology, just 5 words that sounded like regret but left all the heavy lifting to me. I didn't reply. Around the same time, the church posted photos on Facebook of the youth band playing my old drum kit. Same kit, same shells. My heart sank when I saw the picture. Like watching someone wear your clothes, sleep in your bed, pretend to live your life. I felt stupid for how much it still hurt. I wasn't a teenager anymore. I was a working musician. I had proof now. Liner notes, contracts, even a tax form listing me as an independent artist. But the wound was still fresh. And seeing my drums turned into a donation, made me feel like a ghost in my own past. Tessa, practical as ever, told me, "They didn't believe in it when you were building it. They don't get to share it now that it's real." She was right. Weeks turned into months. I kept my head down and worked. By late spring, I was part of a small house band at a recording studio on Gallatin Avenue. We did late-night sessions for up-and-comers, backing tracks for documentaries, soundscapes for podcasts. It wasn't glamorous, but it was consistent. And it paid enough for me to finally start putting money away again. I saved for almost a year and built a new kit. This one was even better than the first. Gretsch shells, custom wrapped in a deep navy satin finish, and hand-hammered Istanbul cymbals. Every piece was something I chose with intention. No compromises, no one else's hands. And this time, No one but me had the key to the studio where it was kept. Somewhere in that period, I realized I hadn't spoken to my parents in almost a year. I hadn't blocked them, but I never picked up, never called back, never answered the door when they came to Tessa's once with a Tupperware container of baked spaghetti and a handwritten note saying, "You're always welcome home." I wasn't ready to be the bigger person. Not then. Maybe not ever. Because while they were cooking casseroles and sending empty texts, I was out here working every job that came my way, pouring myself into tracks that would maybe land me another chance at something real. I started doing session work for a few small indie labels in town. One of the artists, a singer-songwriter named Iris Shaw, liked how I played with musical restraint. She asked me to join her on a 6-stop Southern tour. I said yes. It wasn't stadiums or red carpets. It was dive bars, bookstores, outdoor patios with strings of lights and barely tuned monitors. But I got to play every night. I got to tune my snare with my own ears, adjust my toms to fit the room, feel the vibrations of people listening, really listening, and leaning in. One night in Asheville, after our set, a man in his 60s came up to me and said, "You play like you're telling a story." It was the best compliment I'd ever gotten. Somewhere in the middle of the tour, my dad sent me a long email. He'd never been a writer, but the message was clear. He was confused, ashamed, and trying to piece together how he'd misjudged me so badly. He never said sorry, just wrote, "I thought you were chasing noise. I didn't realize you were building something sacred." I didn't reply. Not because I hated him, but because there's a difference between forgiveness and access. And at that time in my life, I couldn't afford to hand over access to someone who had only ever tried to dismantle what I built. I'd lost that first kit, lost a part of myself in the process, but I found something else too. And I wasn't about to trade that for a few lukewarm admissions of guilt. Not yet. A year after that tour, I booked my first full set as a solo percussionist on a collaborative showcase in Nashville. It was one of those curated nights at a mid-sized venue called the Basement East, a place where locals, touring acts, and industry scouts all intersect. I was opening for a well-known folk artist and had my own 20-minute solo set featuring an experimental loop station I'd been working with. It wasn't massive, but for me it was everything. Tickets sold out within days, thanks mostly to Iris shouting me out online. The venue held maybe 400 people, but I could feel every seat breathing, with anticipation the moment I stepped behind the kit. I'd had my new drums for about 8 months by then. They were beautiful. Deep blue with silver accents, custom wrapped with the initials FR etched into the snare in cursive script. My hands didn't shake when I played anymore. My shoulders didn't lock. I was in my body, entirely present. Every beat was intentional. After my set, I went backstage to breathe. People clapped, really clapped. I had never felt such clarity, and that's when my phone buzzed. Unknown number. We're at the show. Would love to talk if you're free. After, Dad. I stared at it for a minute. I hadn't seen either of them in nearly 2 years, and now they were here. I asked one of the event staff if she could confirm, and she pointed them out. Second row, right by the left speaker stack. Dad in a blazer that didn't quite fit anymore. Mom with her hands folded on her purse like she was sitting in church. I didn't respond. I didn't go out to greet them. Instead, I walked calmly to the venue manager and made a quiet request. I wanted the host to acknowledge me again on stage, by full name during the closing speech. Nothing dramatic, just a little reinforcement of who I was, what I'd done. When they announced the lineup again at the end of the night, the host said, "And of course, a huge thank you to Zara Reeves, whose solo set tonight reminds us why Nashville remains the heartbeat of live music. If you missed her album credits on Ashes of November, you weren't listening hard enough." The crowd clapped again. Some people stood. I didn't look for my parents. I didn't need to. That was enough. 2 days later, I got an email, this time from Mom. "We had no idea how far you'd come. Watching you perform, we were speechless. I think your father cried. We were watching Zara deeply. Can we please talk this time?" I replied. "I'm glad you saw it, but what you saw was just the surface. Everything that came before, every hour I practiced in that garage, every gig you ignored, every not good enough. That's part of the story too. And I carry that with me, just like I carry the beat. I don't hate you. I've just built something beautiful without your help, and I'm not ready to let you back in just because you finally believe it exists. Take care.